Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Glowhood podcast. I'm your host Danielle Mamet. Today's episode is going to cover the topic of growth. So now let's get into it. Okay, so as many of you know, being on this planet, it requires growth. Excuse me. It requires growth. You know, from the time that we are conceived until the time of birth, there's a growth process. And then from the time of birth up until adulthood, there's another growth process. And then during your adulthood, there's also a growth process. These processes are different areas in which growth occurs. The same way a plant that is seeded is buried into the ground and it sprouts and grows into a beautiful plant, whether it's a rose bush, whether it's an oak tree, or whatever plant that it is, it grows. All animals, all things on this planet grow. And one thing I want to really discuss is how growth is not necessarily linear. And this was inspired by a quote that I saw by Mr. KOA on Instagram. His post says, "The funny thing about growth is that it is not linear. Our perceptions of what is considered to be growth tend to be subjective in nature due to our environments. Start looking at your life in its totality rather than single elements, and you'll realize you've been killing." And then he says the S word. So I want to expound on that because I've been contemplating different things, and I also was thinking about how, as a person, it's very interesting to see how growth appears on different people at different stages in life. Right now, a lot of people are growing in their knowledge, and I'm seeing this movement mostly on the internet, obviously, but I'm seeing that people are growing their knowledge in stocks and things, and I want to use that as a comparison of how growth actually happens. So, if you know anything about the stock market, or if you just look at any of the charts, you'll see that even though a stock is growing, it has tendencies to pull back. So it'll get to a certain price point and then it'll drop below that price point, and then it'll go back up to an even higher price point, and then it'll drop a little bit lower, and then so on and so forth until the overall momentum is growth. So that is to say, one stock that we can elaborate on, I guess, for this year would be Tesla. This year, Tesla stock started at about $400 per share, and then currently right now it is $1,100. So that is extreme growth. In the period of 1 year, it's grown over $700, I believe, if my math is correct. And I just want us to be able to apply that to our lives and apply that to the way that we view things. I know for me, sometimes it's hard to look at the bigger picture when we are going through things, or when we're currently in the midst of a growth phase. It's hard to look at the big picture to see just how far you've come. But if you do end up looking at how far you've come, you realize how much you've grown in that experience. Or even, for example, children. If you're around a kid all the time, you're not going to see their daily growth. However, you know, when other family members come around, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you've grown so much," because they're able to see the growth. That's to say that growth is not linear. We should not view our lives as a very straight, even path, because 9 times out of 10, it is not. There's always something that's coming up to kind of divert us, or there's a boundary or a blockage in one part. So we have to maneuver and navigate and figure out a way to get back to the path that we are trying to get on. And then with growth is also not a very easy process in general. It requires you to get out of your comfort zone. It requires uncomfortability. Growth is something that, as a person, again, it is inevitable. At least physical growth, for the most part, is inevitable. However, spiritual growth is not necessarily inevitable if you're not putting in the work. So I would like us to kind of focus on working on ourselves in a more spiritual manner. And when I say spiritual, I'm talking about your emotional intelligence, your mental intelligence, all those things combined, because to me that's more spiritual. Those are things that you cannot see but you can feel, as opposed to things that you can see, such as, growing an inch taller every year, or whatever the case is. And I kind of just want us to just remember that growth, again, is not linear. Just like success, it is not linear. You are bound to hit road bumps. You are bound to hit speed bumps. You're bound to hit obstacles and blockages that will force you to maneuver, force you to think about things in a different perspective in order to get the solution that you're seeking. And the more we think about the overall picture, the better it is for us in general, the better we are in terms of assessing our growth and being able to get from point A to point B. All of us were not the same people we are today 5 years ago. Every single person has changed in some way, whether it's aging, whether it's by gaining more knowledge, whether it's by becoming wiser, whatever the case is, we have all grown in some way. And if you're feeling down, if you're feeling like you're not able to progress, or you're feeling stagnant, just think about this. Growth is an uncomfortable process, and it is a long process. It's not something that happens overnight. It takes years and years for growth to occur. In any case, growth is still happening. So long as you focus and are consistent in what you're doing, growth is inevitable. So as a person, I would like us to remember, piggybacking off of last week's episode of stating that everyone has a purpose. You have a purpose. Just remember to stay focused. Remember to continually seek new ways to grow and to operate outside of your comfort zone. Don't just get comfortable and, ignore whatever it is that you are doing. Seek uncomfortability for growth. Because granted, you can be uncomfortable and not grow, which would kind of defeat the purpose of the whole process, or you can be uncomfortable and grow. Growing means changing your perspective to see what lessons you can be taught in that situation, to see what things and new skills you can develop in circumstances. Making sure that you're able to grow as an individual is going to give you the most fulfilling life. And it's not only going to give you a fulfilling life, it's going to teach others how to also live fulfilling lives. And that's what, at the end of the day, that's what I want all of us to do, is to be examples to others. Myself as a Christian, I prefer us to be examples of God's light and God's mercy and grace all over our lives, because every single one of us are technically role models and examples, whether we like it or not, whether we realize it or not. We are all inspiring and influencing the next person, whether it's subtly, whether it's majorly. We influence each other. We are a species that thrives on social interactions. So for myself and to my fellow Christians out there, I just want us to be able to remember to focus, to grow spiritually in the Word of God, and to be able to be a light and a beacon to others. Because right now, with the way that the world is going, it's very important for us to stand firm in our foundation. We are like trees, and we need to be able to withstand any of the elements that come our way and to show others how to do the same. This is a short episode today, but thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Glowhood podcast. Let me know if you like this episode. You can find all of our episodes, as well as this one, on our website at www.glowhood.com and on all social media pages at Glowhood Podcast. And I hope to see you in the next episode. Take care of yourselves and remember to stay blessed. Bye.